Get ready to ride along for another exciting episode of No Driving Gloves, where Derek, John, and Will use over 75 years combined industry knowledge to bring you a bare-knuckled view on the collector car hobby. So let's get rolling. As the intro just said, it's time again for another episode of No Driving Gloves. The three of us are here. We're all back. We probably won't recap what we've done this week because I assumed, did anybody do anything exciting this week? We never do anything.
Yeah, no, I actually did get to get out in the shop and work some this week, so that was pretty nice. So still looking for that person to hire to come in the office and take over some of my duties in here, so that way I can be out in the shop more. But other than that, pretty normal.
Status quo for you, Derek?
Yeah, pretty much. Went to a wedding of a friend and, got my killer dance moves on. But other than that.
Yes, you can
I
laugh
got
at distracted
me now. That
picturing
was a
your
joke.
killer dance moves.
I was laughing on that side.
And it seemed, we've had a pretty good run of weeks with automotive news and being able to pick on some automotive news. It's been a pretty quiet week for everybody. I think everybody got partied out in Vegas with Will. I heard he was buying rounds over at the Bellagio. And
that's right. I hit it big on the craps table and just started buying everybody, and what it is everybody's talking about Christmas already. So we're not worried about cars when Christmas is coming up right after Halloween.
And we should do a Christmas episode coming up here and talk about things that you can buy us for Christmas.
There we go.
Us as in car collectors.
I like it.
Not as in us, but
Whoa. No. Us, as in the three of us, and they can send it to us.
And if you would like to be featured and suggested on those episodes, please send your gifts right away.
There you go.
In my waking up every morning, I always spend some time on MSN. It seems to be just as controversial as any other news site out there anymore. And they always have some sort of car article. And one drifted across my desk a couple of weeks ago. And it was a topic that's kind of partial to me because it's my generation. It's Will's generation. It's Derek's generation. And this guy had a column entitled, "These cool cars from the 80s and 90s are absolutely worthless collectibles." Let's take into the account, what is a worthless collectible? Does it mean it's not a lot of money, or it's not passionate, not a car that's worth buying? A lot of cars from the 80s and 90s, as we sit here today, we're going to think that they're never going to be worth anything. They're not worth a lot. They're boring, mundane cars. They're cars we grew up with, kind of the way I think of a Ford Fusion Sport today, or I'm trying to think, or Ford Focus RS or ST, or, I don't even know what the hot one is. And I'm not a big fan of the new Honda Civic Si. Just busy cars that don't quite fit my thinking. And I'm going to say, I'm not going to think they're going to be collectible. And I don't know if this is where this writer's coming from, but we did a quick overlook of this article, and he suggests 11 or 12 cars, and we'll see how many of them we can get through. And all three of us go, what the hell is he talking about? These cars are the epitome of what brings passion and enjoyment to cars, especially to people in middle class that have a little bit of disposable income. Well, we can all agree their Ferrari Testarossa from 1986 is going to be worth something. A couple of years ago, they were $60,000. This year, they're $120,000. Porsches are just crazy everywhere, and unless you're driving a 928, they're, anything. 944s are worth something. 914s, even though it's the 70s, are worth something. 911s are always worth something. It was amazing. I saw something today with a 73 911T in pieces. And then the bid price on it's $6,000 or $7,000 on Bring a Trailer, which seems absolutely ludicrous to buy a car that you can't guarantee is complete for that kind of money. And it's an old with a lot of rust problems. And I'm thinking the author of this is a little bit older than me. I'm the oldest one of the three of us here sitting here talking tonight. But we're going to go through the list and kind of voice our opinions on why we think this way. If we do agree, there's a couple that we might agree with. But, the first car this guy launches off with is the 84 to 96 Chevrolet Corvette, the C4 Corvettes. I have my opinions on this. I think Will does. I think Derek has a little bit of interest in Corvettes and knows some of these Corvette collectors. We'll go ahead and let him start. Derek, do you think the C4 Corvette is a worthless collectible?
Absolutely not. Now, would you like me to explain why?
Say, let's do this the quick way for you. Absolutely not. It's in the nature of my job preservation that this car remain collectible and hopefully worth something. No, honestly, we're impartial here. I'll tear apart a motorcycle or I'll tear apart a Lotus race car if it's justified. Lotus, lots of trouble, usually serious. That's the way it is. But do you think a C4 Corvette, in the whole scheme of the Corvette thing, is a worthless collectible when me as a 46-year-old today, when I become 65, is it still going to be a worthless collectible?
Personally, no, I don't think so. I mean, right now, a C4 Corvette base model, let's not look at ZR1s or anything like that. Yes, the base models are affordable right now. Maybe not. And like John said, we're pretty open here. I have ties to Corvette history. We all know that. The C4 Corvette is probably one of the least liked Corvettes right now by Corvette collectors, Corvette owners. There is a big following of C4 Corvettes. There is a group of Corvette owners and collectors that they love the C4 because it's the Corvette they remember from being a kid, or when they were old enough to buy their first Corvette, it was the C4 they got, and they love that car. So even though they necessarily haven't retained their value right now, it's with any of these, and I think we're looking at this, we're only 37, 38 years out from 1980. Okay, in 1990, we're 27, 28 years out. I mean, it's the end of 2017. To me, this is hard because you're trying to look at something and call it a worthless collectible. In 1930, someone would have said a 1910 automobile was a worthless piece of junk and we should send it to the scrapyard. But now they're extremely valuable. I think with the C4 Corvette especially, we're going to see it become more and more valuable as time goes on because there's going to be a larger following of them. There's eventually going to be fewer of them still around because people don't, there might be ones out there that are sitting out in the backyard under a tree. And granted, it's fiberglass. The body's not going to rust away, but everything else is going to have corrosion issues, from the engine to the frame to the suspension driveline system. And somebody's probably going to get to a point where I don't want to restore that. I'm going to send it to the junkyard, and people are going to rip the fenders and all the body panels off of it to restore a different one. Even though they're not worth that much right now, I think we're still going to move into a point where they're going to become more valuable, more collectible. And the other thing is, and we'll probably hit on this on every car that we're going to go over on this list, whether we like it or not, is this is the way people get into the hobby, by buying an affordable C4 sports car or a C4 Corvette is probably one of the more affordable sports cars that have fairly high horsepower and actually are an extremely well-handling car. The C4 is a very well-handling car, and I mean, you can take it out on a track and have quite a bit of fun with it. So really, I see it as, it might not be a valuable collectible, but it's not worthless. There's a lot of worth in a C4.
I agree, especially too on my side of it, being that Good Guys has opened it up to 87. I mean, you could take a 84, 85, 86, or 87, and do some really cool stuff to it. Suspension mods, put an LS motor in it. Heck, put it on a C5 type drivetrain. Put a transaxle in it. There's a lot of things you could do. I mean, the cars aren't ugly. They have a pretty neat look to them, and yeah, they're definitely not worthless on the customizing side of it either. Because, like you said, they're good handling cars straight out of the factory. Independent rear suspension. I mean, they're actually they're kind of hard to get in and out of the way you kind of sit down in them, but you know, I I don't. They're definitely not worthless for sure.
Now I'll be a little bit of the Mr. Negative on this one, and we can talk about the C4 Corvette is a good collectible. It is a Corvette. All Corvettes at some point in time become collectible. I joke that the 75, 76s, and 77s will never become collectible, but they always will. When I started to get into Corvettes in the 90s, mid-years were the big cars, the 63 to 67s, and people, you really don't want a 70 or 71. Well, the 68s and 69s became expensive, and then the 71 and 72s did. And then you had your 73 and 74s with their unique things. And then I think we've jumped to the 78 to 82s with the big glass rear windows. It's a different body style, a little bit different look. The C4s will follow suit. The dashboards go bad in these cars. The glass tops go bad. I mean, it's alluded to in this article that it's common knowledge, but as these cars become collectible, they built a lot of them. I mean, in Corvette numbers, they built a ton of them. No, they didn't build as many of these as they did Ford Escorts, but people will figure out the dashboards. We'll have replacement dashboards. We'll figure out how to repair them. The little Arduino and Raspberry Pi computers can run anything in the Corvette dashboard that could go wrong. And with the maker community we have out there, people will figure out how to program and make these things work. The engines in these cars, especially when you get into the LT1, those are a wonderful platform to build off. The major aftermarket manufacturers are building and increasing the power of these engines. And this will come into play in a couple of the other cars we talk about farther down the list. Those engines have come into their own. They're putting out 600 and 700 horsepower reliably for not a lot of money. So how you can say, the price of admission on a running driving C4 Corvette's $4 or $5 grand right now, if you look. I mean, price of admission on a ZR1, you can get into a ZR1 for the teens. You can get into a ZR1 cheaper than a Honda Civic. A Corvette is a good buy no matter what model. The ZR1's always going to be the top of the line, the one to have. You have the 90 and the 91, and then the 92, 93, 94, 95s are a little bit different, but they're ultimate horsepower. They were king of the hill cars. They were on top, they were the car to have. It was that or the Viper. Those were the ultimate 400 horsepower sports cars. Unheard of horsepower of the day. 400 horsepower, yeah, you can buy that in, a Fusion will have a Fusion Sport is pushing 400 horsepower today, but in 1990, that was unbelievable numbers. Why they might be worthless and don't cost a lot. These cars will become worth something if you had it and you were in it for a long haul. I'm going to say just about everything on this list, because I know what the list is a keeper. You buy it now for little or no money, and in 20 years when I'm 65, these are the cars that are going to be your Barrett Jackson big dollar cars, as I call it, home equity cars, where people will be doing home equity loans so that they can finally have these cars. But if you got the $5 grand now and you can put up with this, the troubles and these cars maturing into the collector car market with the limited parts availability there is now, but as that parts market grows, I say this is a keeper.
Well, and that's exactly it, John, because the other thing here, the title these cool cars from the 1980s and 1990s are absolutely worthless collectibles. If you look at anything that anyone collects, not cars, I mean, toy collectors, uh, clock collectors, whoever's out there, art collectors, whoever it is, the trick to building your collection and eventually having something that you've invested in and have made money on is to buy things when they're affordable and allow them to mature, as you just said, into the valuable collectible. So I don't even see where there can even be something called a worthless collectible. It just hasn't matured into its collectability yet.
It goes back to the saying that's commonly repeated around me is you can never pay too much, you just buy too soon. It will eventually, if it's a collectible, it's eventually going to appreciate into that dollar figure that you paid. It might take 20 years. It might be your grandkids who realize the profit on it. But at some point in time, everything becomes old enough to become collectible and should become valuable. Part of this, worthless collectibles, I would say a Ford Escort GT from the 90s is going to have its niche market. Still might be kind of collectible, but that's going to be more of the worthless collectible. It's never going to realize something. I see the C4 Corvette becoming something valuable, and you're going to say until it becomes 60 or 80 years old, then that's a different thing, because then it becomes an absolute rarity, right?
A Geo Metro will not be collectible.
Yes.
I mean,
I disagree. A Geo Metro LSI convertible, I believe, will become a collectible vehicle.
Okay.
The Suzuki Swift, I think it's a GTI. It's a LSI, Geo Metro LSI convertible, will become collectible. A Suzuki Swift GTI, which is a Geo Metro and Suzuki garb with a 1.6 liter 4-cylinder, if you can find one. I saw one for sale on Barn Finds a couple of weeks ago. Absolute piece of junk. Don't go buy this car. Don't go seek it out. But if you can find one of those, it's a very fun pocket rocket. And in the late 90s, I really compared that to my CRX SIs. Fortunately, I could have the CRX SI, and that was a much better car than that. But there are the niches in each model, I think, that could be collectible. You know, it's not on the list, but what about a Ford EXP? It's just a 2-seat Escort. When's the last time you saw one? But they're a fun, interesting, unique car. So,
I mean, how many times have you been at a car show or somewhere and the older gentlemen are always like, man, I can't believe I got rid of that, 67 Chevelle or 55 Chevrolet. They wasn't worth nothing back then, and now, I mean, it's the same type scenario too. I mean, I remember my dad telling me stories buying, 57 Chevrolet hardtops, pretty decent cars for $200 or $300. And, and it's the same, it's kind of the same thing where, no, you're not going to go buy a C4 Corvette for $200, but, he did buy a lot of them and put them up, and we've built several Tri-5s here at the shop, and there hadn't been one come through that I didn't go up in the barn and grab some parts that I knew he had, or rob a piece off of a car, or something, and he wishes he would have gotten more, but he's collected several over the years, and kept them up pretty good. I mean, they didn't rot to the ground, but they probably could have been kept up a little better.
when I was a teenager, you could buy a 73, 74 Nova for $400 or $500, and as kind of the rich kid, or one of the richer kids, or perceived, I never thought anything of them. Those were junk cars. I wouldn't want one. I wouldn't want to touch one with a 10-foot pole. Get it away from me. Why does this hot girl want to go out with this guy who's got this crappy Nova, and not me, who's got this, cool pickup or cool CRX or buddy who's got a brand new Mustang GT. Never made sense to me because you should in high school you should date guys for their cars. That's that's to help those high school listeners we have and educate the high school girls we have listening. I just watched an episode of Count's Customs where a guy had one built by the Count. Yes, we're talking reality TV and believe what you will about it. But he was in his 40s, had it built for his brother, who had one when he was in high school, who regretted selling it, only paid a couple $100 for it. And what do you think Count's Customs paid to totally restore and do to countize this car, whatever you want to talk about? He's got to have 50 grand into the car now. That Nova was a worthless collectible from the 70s if this article would have been written 20 years ago. Now it's not a worthless car and people are putting money into it.
But, and talking about that 73, 74 era Nova, the 1974 Pontiac GTO that I had is the Nova. GM decided to move the GTO away from the Le Mans Tempest bodies and put it into the Nova body. Different front sheet metal.
So you were one of those kids.
I honestly would say Derek would have with his GTO would probably have fallen into that. And go back 10 years prior to me being a teenager, go to the generation before me that was a teenager, they would have made fun of Derek for his Falcon. It's, that's like, it's like a 1962 Escort.
Yeah.
But today it's a collectible car.
Yeah. And that's the thing when my dad was working at GM dealerships in 1974. And when the GTO came out in 74, brand new at the dealership, all the guys at the dealership hated him. The GTO guys hated him because they were no longer the Tempest Le Mans. It was they'd ruined the car. And of course, that was last year they built the GTO. But now it's a fairly collectible GTO. It's not the most collectible of them, but guys that are GTO guys and collect GTOs and try to get a good representation of GTOs, they're looking for the 74 because it's a 1-year car. It's the only year it was built that way. It's a unique body to the GTO, and it's become very collectible. It hadn't been for a long time. Even when we bought the car, my dad was like, I swore I'd never own one of these, and here I am buying it.
and it goes into, I'm not sure what this author of this article said, because the next car we'll jump to, and I'm going to combine two of his listings. He says 82 to 92 Chevrolet Camaro and then Firebirds. He doesn't say Trans Am, but I guess you could throw them into that too. Are you kidding me? It's a Camaro. Camaros, every generation of Camaro, again, is collectible. I know people collecting their 78, 79, 80, 140 or 130 horsepower Z28s. Those are the collectible car now. They're sister to the Bandit Trans Ams. The original Camaros are collectible. You're telling me that the whole that high school era, I was in high school 86 to 90. We're talking 82 to 92. That Camaro, which was the dream car of half my classmates, is not going to become a valuable car. It's a worthless collectible. These cars trade for more than that C4 Corvette we just defended right now. They're a great alternative to the Fox Body Mustang, which, believe it or not, is included on this list also. He has Mustangs listed twice as 79 to 92 Mustang GT and then 79 to 92 Mustang. I don't understand this article. Please, people, don't read MSN for car news, is I guess what we're saying. Here's 4 pony cars that every generation of the car, with the exception of the Mustang 2, and that just never existed. Let's forget that one. But even it is kind of collectible. There are people that want Mustang 2s. I've got a friend that is a major Maverick collector. I never believe Mavericks are collectible, but I see his Facebook posts all the time. He's in southern Alabama in the Mobile area, and he's into Mavericks. And you know what? There's huge Maverick shows. There's Mavericks everywhere. When I visited Will's open house 4 or 5 weeks ago, do you know what was there? Not only a Falcon like Derek's, there was a Maverick. How can you not say that a Camaro or a Trans Am or a Firebird or a Fox Body Mustang is, how can you say they're worthless collectibles? These are the most desirable cars right now because they're affordable and get you into the hobby. Somebody tell me I'm wrong.
Well, you're not. I know of 2 high-end hot rod shops. I know one of them has won the Riddler, and one of them has had a grade 8 car. So, I mean, we're not talking fly-by-night rod shops here. We're talking high-end people come in there to spend a lot of money, hot rod shops. And both of those shops are building 82 to 92 Camaros right now. They're big money cars. So, I mean, on my side of it, there you go. That's you don't get any more collectible than somebody spending, I don't know, 200,000 to 300,000 or 400,000 on a car. One of them, they've taken all of the plastic off the front and made it all out of aluminum, and moderned up the headlights, and this is a for real high end custom car being built out of a 82 to 92 Camaro. And I haven't seen any pictures of the other one, but I mean, he told me that it was a badass car. So there you go. On my side of it, that's complete bogus.
You know what, John? You're wrong. Just because you asked somebody to tell you you're wrong, I'll tell you you're wrong. I mean, maybe not about the Camaro, but I'm sure about something. But the thing I'm noticing here is in his article, he is talking about the issue with the Iron Duke, the cast iron 4-cylinder engine that was dropped into these, and that is makes the car a worthless collectible. And that's fine if everybody wants to think that the Iron Duke, 4-cylinder Camaro, Firebird, whatever, is worthless junk. Go ahead, buy them up and rip it out, customize it, drop a V8 in it, whatever you want to do. I'll go out and buy one that has the 4-cylinder in it, stick it away for a few years, and when they're all gone, and mine's one of few that's left, then it'll be even better. So maybe this article is actually good because it will make people destroy enough of the cars that the ones that are left are going to be even more valuable collectibles.
That's right. Well, he is complaining about them being underpowered, but I mean, let's face it. How much horsepower did a '69 SS big block Chevelle have? I'm not 100% sure what they had, but I guarantee you these, Chevrolet trucks running around have got more power than that. So everything back then was underpowered. You could get a 307 in a Chevelle. I mean, they didn't have any power. So, what he's saying makes zero sense at all. I mean, yes, the SS 396 Chevelle is obviously going to bring more money than a 307 base Chevelle, but it's still a collectible car.
Yeah, you can't lump one entire era of a car into a worthless collectible because the base model of it was underpowered. That's been the way the auto industry has worked forever. There's always the base model and something with more horsepower. That's just pretty much the way things go.
It's like saying square body Chevy trucks are worse because you could get an Oldsmobile diesel in them. I mean, come on.
And diesels are cool.
They are, but not them Oldsmobile diesels. Things are garbage. Boat anchors.
There's a whole nother podcast, how General Motors destroyed the reputation of the diesel in America.
That's right.
I'll say you have the base model, but there's certain people that like the base model cars. They don't want the big V8 5 liters and that. But as I alluded to, the early 80s were just coming out of the fuel crisis, the emission stuff. That's the days of the 130 or 140 horsepower Corvettes and Camaros, and there wasn't a lot of power. Everything was a dog back then. With some simple tuning and some simple procedures, without destroying a lot of the originality, you can make those cars perform. And the same thing is, but even the 4-cylinder Mustangs or the 4-cylinder Camaros, your Camaro Berlinettas and your base Mustang LX and GL, I believe, was the base early on. They still make good donor cars for a 5-liter swap, etc. If you wanted to have the faster car, which then again makes the lesser option cars potentially more valuable. But I will admit that a 6-cylinder Camaro or a 6-cylinder Mustang from 1965 or 67, pick your appropriate year for the model, is always going to be worth less than a 289 car or a Shelby car or a Yanko car. But there's something to be said about the purity and seeing that simplicity. Like the museum I work in, we've got multi-$100,000 cars, and one of my most enjoyable cars there to drive is a 50 Plymouth. It's very basic, very simple, but there's something to be said about getting in and getting that purity out of a car. And that jumps to where the next one I'm going to jump to on this guy's list, and there might be some validity in it, is the 87 to 90 Jeep Wranglers. And that's narrowing down that. I get it confused. I guess that's a YJ Jeep. It's the leaf springs, square headlights. And when that came out, the square headlights were cool. I remember Chrysler buying AMC and discontinuing the CJ7 because of its rollover and widening the track and making this Jeep a little bit safer. And then by 91 or 92, they squared off the roll cage in the back to protect the rear passengers in case of rollover. But it is a Jeep. And it's, to me, and my ex-wife used to have a 95 Wrangler. And I hated it. It's, inline 6, 5-speed. It wasn't a sports car, and I'm kind of a sports car guy. But part of me kind of says to myself now and then, maybe I should go buy one of these. They're kind of fun cars because the leaf spring suspension, it's simple to modify. It's durable. It's off-roadish. It's a Jeep. It's as basic of a Jeep as you can get in this package. And to me, the TJ and YJ packages, you don't have the coil springs, same basic body, same basic shape. Jeeps today are, to me, even worse. The too much plastic on the dash and the airbags, etc. But how can you discount any Jeep? I mean, this guy's putting current value $4,000 to $5,000, but for $4,000 or $5,000, you can have a heck of a lot of fun in a Jeep, and Texas won't take the title away from you either.
The only reason that I think you could even remotely say that a one of these 87 to 90 Jeeps would be worthless is because of the square headlights. But you're right, John. If you want a Jeep, a new Jeep. Have y'all priced new Jeeps? Holy
Yeah.
cow, dude, them things are outrageous. So, for your Jeep collectors, why wouldn't you want one? Because it does have square headlights. I mean, they only made them from 87 to 90. Why wouldn't you want to go get the cream of the crop?
Well, the square headlights actually existed through 95. Ours was the
Okay.
last,
Okay.
of the
All
square
right.
headlights. But
And then if they're that bad, I'm not a Jeep expert or anything, but I'm sure somebody makes a round headlight conversion for them.
That's the thing. That's the thing with a Jeep. Everything on that car is reproduced. If you're as old as me and you used to get the J.C. Whitney catalog, it's like a Model T. You could order everything out of the back of J.C. Whitney and build yourself a fiberglass Jeep. You can order the tub, the doors, the hoods, the fenders, everything.
Well, I actually went to the Smoky Mountain Jeep Jamboree this year with a friend of mine that's a big Jeep fan, and there was not that many YJs there. I will admit that, but there were several, and there were several that had been customized and that were cool. So to say they're worthless, collectibles, like you said, we pretty much disagree with everything this guy said.
We went to Camp Jeep a few times with ours, and I'll admit a Grand Cherokee is a much better off-roader than a Wrangler, but it kind of, to me, in my mind, was, why would I want to pay Grand Cherokee money when I could buy a Wrangler, which at the time, 20 grand would buy you a Wrangler, 40 grand would buy you, a Grand Cherokee. Now 40 grand buys you a Wrangler and 50 grand buys you a Grand Cherokee. They've just, it goes back to our conversations of unnecessary safety equipment and everything they've had to do to try to make this primitive vehicle, basic transportation, fit into the demands of, a daily driver. People today aren't going to put up with the single canvas, manual top, all that stuff that, my ex-wife put up with. I mean, she commuted in it. We had 190 some thousand miles on that. She bought it used with like 14,000. The new Jeep that's coming out, was just introduced, has a power top on it. So they've de-Jeepified the Jeep.
Exactly. And that's going to be the interesting thing. John, like you said, it's a Jeep. Jeep has a following. Jeep people are Jeep people. They love Jeep. Just like any other collector, they probably have their favorite generation, their favorite era, their favorite body style of Jeep. But it has a strong following. It was built initially as obviously the general purpose vehicle for the military and evolved into a quite capable off-road vehicle, or let's call it all-terrain vehicle. And people enjoy them for that reason. There's a lot of people that like to buy them and just drive them on the road. There's a lot of Jeep owners. I've got a friend that's a Jeep Wrangler owner, and he never takes his off-road, but he likes the look of it. He likes the feel of it. And that's what he likes. And that's great. So again, as Will has said, we're going to disagree with almost everything this guy says, most likely, because there are the niche groups out there that will always have the passion, will always collect these things. John, as you were just saying, it brings up an interesting question of, if we start adding power tops to Jeeps and doing the things that are starting to be done, is that going to start to lose the following? Probably different show topic, but it's one of those things where, again, I said it a little bit ago, I don't know that there is anything that is a worthless collectible, because there's always a small group that collects it and thinks it's the greatest thing in the world.
Well, we'll jump into the next one. And this one, I might give him, I can kind of agree with him. It's the least collectible of this model run. And that's the, he says 85 to 92 RX-7. He means 86 to 92 because the 85 was the last year of the original RX-7. And anybody who says that is not a collectible, just turn in your automotive journalism license and go away. 86 to 92, that's when Mazda tried to up the game. They emulated the Porsche 944 in styling and looks. The 944 came out in 83. There's no doubt about it. Mazda's done this, and we'll talk about another car later on, that they emulated and really got it right, at least in our opinions. But the 86 to 92 RX-7, I might give them a pass. It's the biggest, it's the heaviest. It has it in the convertible version. It has the target top, the completely fold down top, tries to be a hard top, the canvas covered hard top, but I would go, it's probably the worst of the RX-7s to have. The prior generation was probably the second best, and of course, everybody, the 93 to 96. We'll have somebody on as a guest here in the very near future who is an expert on the next generation RX-7 and can defend all of that. I'll give the guy a pass on the 86 to 92 RX-7. It's not a worthless collectible. It will eventually, in my opinion, be a collectible, but it'll be the least valuable of the three generations of RX-7s and easily forgotten because it had the most problems of the three generations of RX-7s.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with that. It's not, as you say, I think we can give him a pass on this one. It's not the best looking car in the world. It had its issues. There have been much better RX-7s, as you say, and we'll talk about it in the future, as you said. I'll go with you on this. I'll give him a pass and say that this one probably isn't the most valuable of collector cars that you should be getting involved with.
I don't really know enough about them to really comment, but I do know this, that
they're eligible for good guys now.
well, that's kind of where I'm
That's
going
true.
with this. One of the guys that I rode to football practice with had one of those, when I was in high school, and I remember riding in it thinking, this is kind of a neat car. And looking back at it, there is room under the hood for a for one of those LS motors. We're LS in the world, but I don't think there'd be room for a Coyote or a late model Hemi or something like that. But you could put a 302 in it and fuel inject it, and I'm pretty sure those are independent rear suspension cars too, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I wouldn't be surprised to see one of them stripped down with a hossed up little V8 in it, scooting around the autocross. It has to handle pretty good. If not, you can probably make it handle pretty good on a budget. So, I kind of see them being somewhat collectible, just for the sheer fact of me remembering riding in one when I was a teenager. Not saying I'm going to go out and buy one, but if there was one laying around that was in good shape, that was really cheap, I might pick it up. You never know.
I'm going to jump onto another car. There's like 3 or 4 more left to do, and we're running a little bit long. 90 to 93 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL. Can give the guy a pass on this one also. It's going to fit about that RX-7 thing. I've seen ads for these SLs. Well, they'll give them to you because everything on them's computerized. Everything on them's electronic. Everything on them's proprietary. And everything on them breaks. They are a maintenance nightmare. They are not. If you're going to get one of these cars, step up, get the 500 SL or get the 600 SL, which the 600 SL will bring you to a new realm of expensive repairs and maintenance. The 500 SL at least has a lot more performance and things. You can kind of justify putting the money into it. The 300 SL, I think, will become a forgotten car. Again, it won't be a worthless collectible. If you look at the 100 series Mercedes from the late 50s, which was the taxi cab of the era, guess what? They're collectible. They're on the lawn at Pebble now. The few of these that will eke out of our lives and survive, they still won't be top of the crop, but they'll be few and far between. When you go to a show, you see 600 SL, 600 SL, 500 SL, 500 SL, 500 SL. And if you're lucky, there will be one 300 SL in that group. And that might be its saving grace, is it will be the unicorn of this. I can't remember what generation of Mercedes, but convertible. But it's at the point where it should be. It's the next one to become collectible. But right now, the what I call the heart-to-heart Mercedes convertible, the 73 to 88, there were 450 SLs, 380 SLs, 560 SLs, 300 SLs, and I don't do chassis numbers. Those are the collectible cars, and right now the 560s are the only ones that gain any traction in that market, and they're mid-teens for those. This car, like I said, is just in my opinion, a maintenance nightmare. We glossed over the Jaguar XJS, and I think that falls into the same category. It's a unique body style, but it also, especially in 12-cylinder form, has a lot of needs and wants, and was never even looked upon fondly when new by Jaguar aficionados. And I think will fill a gap, because there is no Jaguar sports car after the E-Type up into the present F-Type. They kind of left, and that's where the XJS will fit in. So that's one I glossed over on this list also. So there were a few that I'll still disagree. They're not absolutely worthless collectibles, but you could make a case for spending $1,000 more and getting a slightly different model of what he has on the list.
But that 300 SL is a damn good looking car. I mean, it's a, it's just a good looking car, and to me I mean, I don't know a lot about them at all, but I mean, just because it's a good looking car makes me want to go buy one, so
if you took a 300 SL, did your LS swap to it, put a modern drivetrain, manual top, or just lived with the removable hard top and things like that, you'd have a great car. But that it falls into that they tried to overtech it with a lot of rough technology. And I've worked in a shop as one of my little part-time gigs, and when you've got to put $5,000, $6,000 into top cylinders to make the top work, and the car's only worth $5,000, it's tough. But going all the way back to the C4 Corvette we opened with, as these cars become more popular or fall into that collectible or the desired range. And again, this is pushing a little bit beyond my high school years, and I didn't have the desire for one. Maybe the people a couple years younger than me, such as you and Derek, or people a few years older than me that were in college trying to become their doctor or lawyer, and this was their motivating force for becoming a doctor or lawyer so they could afford it. Maybe it'll fit into that group. Maybe I'm the wrong person for this group, and I shouldn't be criticizing this car.
Well, I don't think that, at least from my perspective, I can't speak for Will, but this wouldn't be a car for me from the younger generation. It's just, it's an okay looking car. I don't think I have as much passion for its styling as Will does.
Come on, you like it.
And that's okay, because everyone's different. Everybody can like a different vehicle, right? It's okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you. It's okay. But I think the big problem with these cars, and probably a good reason that he is including this car, is what John's talked about. The cars in the 90s era, high-end luxury, even some of the supercars with Ferrari, and the addition of all the technology and the computer system and everything that went into these cars and, as John called it, overteching it is the biggest downfall to these cars, because if they've got proprietary systems in them, they've got clearly out of date systems in them, and we no longer have the parts laying around, the repair ability of the computer systems, they become very difficult to deal with. And in some ways, at least right now, the way I look at it, it's almost more difficult than with a tech computer based system like this, trying to repair it, than going back and working on a one of a kind auto, or the only automobile left from a certain manufacturer from the 1910s, and you have to recreate all the parts, you have to machine them, do all that. It's easier to do that and use the abilities we have than some of these computer systems that are out there, that it's almost impossible to repair them or get them to run again. And you've got to go in and just completely redo the entire computer system with some new system that you try to make work correct and do what it needs to do. And I think that's one of the big drawbacks on cars like this. You guys might John, you might disagree with me. I don't know.
I just totally agree with you. Is that there's so much to this car. Now, Mercedes is very good about always supporting their automobiles and their classic centers. And I don't know if this car would be eligible for a classic center. They always support their cars. It doesn't mean they're affordable in their support of these vehicles. I mean, like I said, we could get top cylinders for it, but they cost more than the car. It falls into that little hole, and I think every generation has that hole that things fall into as some technology comes along. Things like I alluded to earlier with the Arduino computers and our Raspberry Pis and things, you'll be able to make these systems work. Maybe not exactly like the factory. The cars will still exist. But I think the collectors of the future, they'll put their money into 500s and 600 SLs. The 600s are a 12-cylinder. The 500s are a V8 version of this car, 5-liter V8. I believe Mercedes was still using that kind of nomenclature at that point. And the 300 SL is an inline 6 3-liter. So it again is that bottom of the barrel entry level car, like we were talking the 4-cylinder Mustangs and 4-cylinder Camaros earlier. They'll exist, but these cars are going to give up. A lot of these cars are going to give up their lives to make their bigger, faster brother survive. And now I'm going to jump to this will be the beginning of the two, probably, what the heck was this guy thinking? I mean, the Corvette should have been a gimme to him. The Camaro and Mustang should have been a gimme to him. But products of the 80s and 90s that have had an influence on the world, and he says that the 1983 to 1982 Volkswagen Golf GTI is an absolutely worthless collectible. This car defined and created a whole section of the automotive industry. My beloved CRX would not exist without this car. Today's Focus RS would not exist without the Volkswagen GTI. The Volkswagen R32 would not exist without the Volkswagen GTI. This car, like I said, created a niche market, but nobody realized it. The 83, 84, 85 GTIs are extremely rare because they were throwaway cars. The ones that survive now are extremely lucky. The early ones, non-modified stock, seem to be desirable. I see them listed for sale not very often, but when they are, they go for what I think is serious money right now for what you're getting. This guy puts current value $2,000 to $3,000. I couldn't tell you last time I saw a good GTI sell for anywhere close to that. These are $6,000 to $10,000 automobiles all day long, if not more, dependent on condition. I'm just really at a loss for words on how you put the GTI in worthless collectibles. This car, This car is too important to our generation and every generation after us in what it created. Are either one of you overly familiar? I know we're jumping into this foreign sports car stuff, and we're about as far from brass air as we can get in street rods or hot rods.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not well versed in the Golf GTI. Okay, I'll admit it. But as you say, John, coming at it from a historical aspect, the historian in me, the curator in me, as you say, the Golf GTI, this is the beginning of what most people refer to today as what I guess I would call, and most people call, the hot hatchback.
Exactly.
The souped up hatchback that is a freaking blast to drive, is an incredible car. And I mean, just for that reason alone, the story behind the GTI, the Golf GTI, the story behind this whole idea of the hatchback becoming a souped up, sporty, fun car rather than just the family grocery go-getter type situation. It's that alone is worth collecting it and telling that story and having it and still having fun with it. I mean, I might not know all the details about it and all the specs and the tech and all that, but I mean, come on, from a historical standpoint, awesome freaking car.
I agree. My dad, he didn't have a GTI, but he had a Rabbit. I mean, it was basically the baseline GTI, right?
The GTI was built off of the Rabbit. Yes, there were drastic
Okay.
differences in suspension and engine tuning, but
So, I mean, I wouldn't mind having a Volkswagen Rabbit, to be honest with you. Heck yeah, I'd like to have a GTI, you know? I just shared a picture with you too of one that was
I
a
just
SEMA.
saw it. A little tubbage
So,
going on in that.
dude, there's a freaking LS3 in it.
Oh, dear Lord.
Dude, I'm telling you, I walked up on that thing and I was like, holy cow, look at this, Dad. Me and my dad, we went all over this thing. And yeah, LS3, straight shift, 9-inch Ford. I thought it was really, really cool. And just we'll put it up on our, social media. But just a really, really neat car. And it's at SEMA. Okay. There's not really non-collector cars at SEMA. So there you go.
And I'm going to, as we slide into our final car of the night, or for us the night, for you, hopefully it's early morning on your way into work. My brother, who's 5 years younger than me, and somehow has put himself in a situation that in his teen years, he's had the 4-cylinder Fox body Mustang convertible. He had a CRX, which we have established I kind of am partial to. He had a Volkswagen GTI. He had an 85 GTI. He loved that car so much. The car he had before his present car was a Volkswagen Rabbit because, by the time he was out of school and in working, he had, a budget to live on and drove that car for many years. And last winter, traded it in and bought a new GTI. That car made such of an impact on his life. He loves his GTI, and he had to buy it with the plaid interior and the special shift knob and everything that goes along with this Volkswagen GTI. I have another friend who used to live locally, now lives in northern Indiana, huge Volkswagen person, huge GTI person. And he put a Facebook post up a couple of weeks ago or a week ago of plaid lampshades. And I guess his girlfriend's response was, no, we don't need any more plaid in the house, because the GTI was known for its plaid interior. And it's made that much of an impact on him. And he's in his, excuse me if I'm wrong, I might be wrong on his age. I picture him late 20s, early 30s. And then we're going to roll into this final car. And believe it or not, my brother had one of these and I've had one of these. And this guy, and of every car we've discussed, and we've even, like I said, we've discussed Corvettes, Camaros, Mustangs, GTIs. The 90 to 97 Mazda Miata is a
This is just ridiculous.
Is a worthless collectible. This is the best-selling convertible in history. It's outsold the MGB, which, excuse me, if this car isn't collectible, the MGB isn't collectible. The Austin Healey's are not collectible. The MGAs are not collectible. This car does not make sense. This car is the Lotus Elan from the 60s at its absolute finest in perfection. Mazda has reluctantly admitted in recent years they bought Elans and patterned this car after them. The look of this first generation car, the NA Miatas, looked like the Elan. They copied the engine, the valve cover placement, everything looks like the Lotus Elan. I had mine, and my license plate was Elan Mark III, which is kind of a play on there's been various Mark versions of the original Lotus Elan, but two distinct versions. And then to me, this is a continuation. This is what Lotus should have built instead of the Elan M100 that they built in 1990. It's the perfect sports car. These things go 400,000 miles. They're not worth a lot of money, but MGBs are not worth lots of money, but they're not worthless. And now they're starting to appreciate as they get a little bit older and they start to have a little bit more and more problems. But I mean, a Miata is a perfectly balanced sports car. For people like Will, pick up the phone, make a phone call, and you can have a kit dropped off at your door, and you can put an LS3 in this. You can put an LT1 in this. You can put a Coyote V8. You can put a 5.0 in this thing. When you're doing the Ford engine swaps, you're adding about 200 pounds of weight, if that, and you almost build a much better balanced car with 300 and 400 horsepower. There's body kits available to make this look like Italian sports cars and that. How this car makes this list, tell me.
I don't know. I'd love to get an explanation, though, because as John has already said, if this car is a worthless collectible, the three of us don't belong in this business because we evidently don't know what we're doing.
Let me read what he says, and maybe it explains something. Current value $4,000 to $5,000, which maybe for a well-used one, but I see these trade hands regularly for $8,000, $9,000, $10,000. What did retirees drive before this car existed? Were they all in Cadillacs and Corvettes? Were cheap convertibles like the Chrysler LeBaron just more widely available? There are more convertibles now, but the Miata rekindled this country's love for the drop top after bringing it back to the masses in a sporty package. The Volkswagen Cabrios of this era, cute, we guess, but not as reliable and beloved as this vehicle. Sold new, it provides Porsche Boxster performance at roughly half the price. In fact, this little roadster got a big boost from Consumer Reports just a few years back for not only matching the Boxster's performance, but doing so with fewer repair bills. The original models still make the rounds in sunnier climates, but the fact that more than 410,000 of them have been sold in the U.S. since 1990 means there are plenty out there to choose from without going 2 decades back in time. I think he defended why this car is collectible. I mean, they sold 410,000 of them. It's better than anything out there. If this car sells for $4,000 to $5,000, say as a 90, 91 car, do you know what a 96 Porsche Boxster sells for regularly right now? Is about $6,000 to $7,000. And the Miata sold for half the price at that time. I've lost total thought of words. I am speechless on the insaneness of this being a worthless collectible. It's not worth a lot of money. They built a lot of them. I guess maybe I've looked at this list a little bit wrong. I'm looking at fun for the dollar, etc. As much as I love CRXs, you cannot go wrong with a Miata. Go drive one. Go test drive one. It is an unbelievable car. It is not a car you want to drive in, 2 inches or more of snow in Detroit. So that probably, put Derek out of this game for a while. I owned mine when I lived.
I don't live there anymore.
I owned mine when I lived in Northern Virginia. My brother owned his when he lived in Central Illinois, I believe. And never left us stranded. Just reliable as can be. One of the cars that I truly regret. Well, we'll just leave it there. I don't even know how to go on after you say a Miata is a worthless collectible. It's collectible. I don't think it's worthless. These cars will continue to retain value. Worthless to me means they're not going to do that. Worthless to me means you're throwing money into a hat and it's going to disappear and burn up. A Miata is not going to do that. If you buy the right car, buyer beware. There are 410,000 of them. A lot of them have been modified. A lot of them have been abused. They rust. They're Japanese. The earlier cars have some problems. The 90 to 93s are the smaller engine. I think the 94 to the 97s are the ones to own out of all of them, including the 99s and newers. They didn't make a 98. I'm just, like I say, I'm at a loss. This is the perfect Lotus of the 1990s. And the Lotus is the epitome of sports cars. No matter what you think, I think any car person will tell you that a Lotus is the purest form of a sports car. And what happened here with Mazda, they built the perfect Lotus because it was reliable. It started every morning. They're cheap to repair. They're easy to fix on your own in this generation of car. Yes, the headrest speakers rust out. Yes, the plastic rear window cracks. But you know what? Part of that's the romanticism and the love of having any of these cars is the little issues that creep up. But on a Miata, those little issues don't mean you walk home. And that's where I'm going to leave it on that. So, do you guys have anything to say about the Miata? I've kind of stolen that one. And
I think you pretty well summed that one up.
Yeah. What John said. I'll just say that.
Well, I think with that, we're around our hour or so goal. We try to hit that 55 to 105 every week, and we get somewhere near there. If you have any opinions, I'll link this article on our Facebook. I'll post some of the pictures Will mentioned on Instagram and such, and follow along. Let me hear your opinions on what you think of this article. And I would love to reach out to Jason and see if he would want to come on and defend or explain or maybe retitle his article. That's probably what jumped off the page most at all three of us, is he has justification in his article for what he wrote. It just doesn't fit the title of what he wrote. And for that, I'm out of here for the week. What about you two?
I'm done.
I got work to do.
See you guys in a week.